board first. So Ermeling,
Here.
Feeney,
Here.
Maloney,
Here.
Sparks,
Here.
Jean, not here, Zagami,
Here.
and Ziegler is not here. And then we'll do Finance Committee, Bender,
Here.
Ermeling,
Here.
Maloney,
Here.
Sukup,
Here.
and Yeager let me know that he would not be here.
Number 4 of Finance Committee approval of minutes from previous meeting, July 15th, 2019.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ermeling, second by
I'll second it.
Bender. On the discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Public comments? Anybody in the public area have any comments? Sherry? No? Okay. Number 6, acknowledge work product transmittals, acknowledge July 2019 budget status, all funds. Looking for an acknowledgement.
I'll acknowledge.
Acknowledged by Ermeling, a second by
I'll second.
Sukup. On the discussion, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
Wally, could you do the same for the board, because we don't have it on the board agenda?
Oh, sure, okay, that's
Thank you.
fine. So for the board, I move to acknowledge July 2019 budget status for all funds.
So acknowledge.
Section. Motion by Maloney, second by Zagami. On the question, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Education presentations and reports, number 7, review and discussion of 2020 budget. Hearing none? No, I'm sorry. Wouldn't that be wild?
How did we one day get through?
Sure.
I guess,
I can.
I guess I would make a comment before we get started on the discussion. I appreciate that the village departments got everything, most of their budget put together. Unfortunately, public safety has not had an opportunity to get theirs put in here yet. So I really, I think discussing the budget on a global perspective, I think is important. I really don't want to get into any in-depth on any individual departments not having anything from either EMP or SAFER, because I don't think that's appropriate. I would like to have some discussion both at Finance Committee and the board level when it comes to, prioritizing. It's nice that we're getting this process started early and getting at least some numbers so we kind of know where we're at. But I think it's really important for, especially the board, to look at all the various departments so they can, let's say, prioritize. Having read through the preliminary budget stuff, there's a big increase. So how do we slice it up? The needs are many and the dollars are few. So there's going to be some tough decisions that need to be made. And I don't think it's appropriate to get into any individual department's budget at this point because we don't have a full picture of what the requests are. I'd like to hear the needs, and there's needs and there's wants, and we have to prioritize what the needs are, and some of the wants are going to have to go by the wayside. That's just a reality of budgeting, both at municipal level and in your own home. So that being said, we can open this up for discussion, but I really think it's important that we don't get into any of the individual departments yet, but really kind of talk from a little more global perspective.
I guess I would like to respond to that. We put the village budget together, and I know in the past the village is overwhelming in and of itself just to look at. So I originally wanted to do department by department, but I didn't find a lot of interest in doing that. That's why, okay, we'll start with the village, and then as the other departments get their budgets ready. This is just an FYI. There was no in-depth discussion.
No,
It was at the start
I
of.
get that. I
know, but
I
at
kind of
first
want
it's
to
like,
clarify it for all the board and the
Okay.
committee members that, this isn't a full picture.
and we're not excluding everyone, we're just getting a start. So I first want to start off with the good news. Health insurance came in at 1.08%. That does affect all of our departments, both EMPD, SAFER, and the village. For the village departments, it added about 55,600 onto our budgets. Health insurance for just the village itself is $501,000 of the total budget. In this budget that we're presenting for village employees, we are projecting a 2% CPI increase. That increased the general fund about $25,000, and the other funds it increased about $18,600. The total amount of wages in the budget and salaries, which does not include any overtime, WRS, Social Security, this is strictly wages and salaries, is $2.2 million. 1.2 of that is in the, 1.3 approximately is in the general fund. 946,000 is other funds. A couple other things. 2020 is a presidential year. Election budget went up about 26,000. We don't get anything more from the state during these years. It's coming from our regular operating budget to fund these. An additional 100,000 was requested for street maintenance. This is an area where this is for chip seal and crack seals. If the board is having issues with this, this is something we could also say, okay, we're going to do overlays, and that is something we can borrow for. So this is a point where it's a little bit more flexible. Currently, it's just regular operating. We budgeted an additional 30,000 for salt. Last year was pretty rough on our salt shed. We got our salt, and what we do is with the salt bill that came this past week, we'll split 50% in 2019 and 50% in 2020. Gas is going up. We needed to increase our budget about 10 grand, and an additional $5,500 is being budgeted in overtime for winter maintenance.
So overtime for winter maintenance is 5,500?
That's the increase.
Okay, so my question on salary and wages, historically, like the last 5 years, what is a percentage of OT? Do we, I mean, we don't need
I
that now.
don't have the last 5 years.
I'd like to know what it is or for the next time,
Okay.
just so that we know what it is. And Clay, same thing with you. If we could just, just a ballpark of, it's really nice to look at what everybody actually is making, salaries or hourly. But let's see what the real picture is with the OT, and just see how, if it's not that much or if it's quite a bit, okay? Just
Would you
maybe
like
the
it
last
broken out by department for the village?
If it's not too hard.
Sure.
It might not be the worst way to look at it, yeah.
What contributed to our health insurance increasing only 1.08%?
Sherry, do you have any comments on that one?
Well, our loss ratio went down.
Our mod?
So
Okay.
before, our loss ratio was very high, it was over 100%. So the insurance company, they weren't making any money on our group. And I think that loss ratio came down to 80-some percent. So they are making a bit of money on it. And I think we have a group of employees here that participate in our wellness program, which they run for us. And they put a lot of time and effort into that program with us. And there might be something with that, with keeping us there. For the most part, we're happy with them. But yeah, so, and I think, as far as claims go, they're making money on us. It must not look so bad. I haven't seen any claim information, but that's really all I can say about that.
It's almost unheard of.
Thank you. Yeah.
That 1.08 is almost unheard
Mark?
of, yeah.
It is, yes.
I'm sorry, Barb?
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, because I probably shouldn't even question it, because I read it and heard it, and I didn't really pay that much attention, but wasn't there something that Walker had done for, regarding insurances? And matter of fact, I was quite surprised, because Evers actually commented that it caused the insurance rates to go down.
I'm not aware of that.
Not either.
Yeah. Could be. I'm
Yeah,
just not
because
sure.
I was surprised
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Evers had commented
Said
that
that?
this was a
Okay.
policy that Walker had implemented, and it actually created
Help, yeah.
insurance. And I'm just,
Mhm.
that it went down.
Yeah,
So-
Bob?
Jessica, just on our own electric bills, I've noticed that there's supposed to be a tentative increase for the next year and over the next 2 years, anywhere between 2 and 8%, depending upon who, what, when, and where. I don't know how that's going to affect us. Obviously, it will increase them accordingly, so I don't know how you've incorporated that into next year's
I
budget.
did not. I kept everything pretty much status quo with the utilities. That's
Street.
maybe something we'll have to look into.
Street lighting being a main thing.
Yeah, we spent about $192,000 in street lighting alone.
Yeah,
That
well,
would have
because
a
they
huge
had,
impact.
the residential was, in the next 2 years, was gonna go up over 10%. And the commercial, which I'm assuming some of ours would be, was still gonna be almost 5. So
Okay.
take a look at that, because that could have a major effect too on
Thank you.
us.
Another question, and Sherry, this one might be more up your area. With the election budget going up to an extra $26,000, is some of that cost offset by the use of Badger books?
It could,
Okay.
potentially, but I have no idea. It's really hard for me to do that estimation at this point. We only use the Badger books for one election. We did save a lot of time in staff hours. But I really have a hard time making that judgment call right now. Most of those wages are in the election workers.
Okay.
That's where the big jump comes in. So
About
the majority of it is in
$50,000.
there.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Anything else?
Okay.
As we move on, as we move on your overall.
This one has it broken down a little bit more by department.
Mhm.
Most of the departments have decreased over last year, except for those few items. Again, I have the summary of the major increases. This next report that we're showing is new this year. We thought it would be more helpful to break down each department by personal services, contractual services, and supplies and maintenance. And we have a really nice summary on the bottom also that would summarize the total general government of these categories.
Just so there's no confusion, that personal services should be personnel services, not personal services. That's something we need, I think that's been in those documents for a long time, we just never caught it. But so at this point, all we could really do is kind of put out there the estimates here for expenses for next year.
Mhm.
And of course, we don't know all the, like, shared revenue numbers and things like that. General transportation aids, those things are all like things that come later. And of course, as President Sparks pointed out, we don't know what the, the safer and the public safety components are, but again, we wanted to get this kind of started early so we could be talking and thinking about what things we may need to adjust going forward, and, acknowledging that we have a ways to go, of course.
Mhm. When did we start this last year? Because I know we got a little earlier start last year. But this is even earlier.
Yes.
Good.
Actually, last year, I think our budget workshop, the first one was in September.
September, okay.
So we're about a
Good.
couple weeks
Sure.
earlier.
Good. Okay.
Earlier.
I just thought it was a great opportunity to really start the discussions, and as Wally says, we need to start talking prioritization. This is a status quo. As you can see, we didn't increase anything this year. We actually decreased except for a couple line items, and those couple, unless the board's gonna have a different strategy with winter maintenance. Some of those line items we cannot not fund. Obviously, we can take from other areas, but that would be a prioritization question. Was there any other questions? Do we want to go through the individual departments, or the summary's good enough? And there were no large requests, I guess, to really discuss, except for those few that I pointed out in the beginning. There's no additional employees. We actually have less wages because we are filling in a current position in the finance with somebody from a clerk. So they're going to be cutting our checks and doing our accounts receivable. We did not fill in that position or rebudget for it.
On village attorney, are we up to date on billing? Or is he behind?
We are not up to date on billing. We should be getting bills for the last 2.5, 3 months tomorrow.
Yeah, because I haven't, when I did the signatures, I haven't seen any bills in there.
No.
But
That's-
you still speculate 35 for the year? You still
No,
estimate?
I did
No?
not. That was
Okay.
35 for next year.
Ah,
Looking at our trends so far, I thought maybe we could reduce it. Obviously, it depends if we are going to have major lawsuits that we'll be fighting.
You should bill us every 30 days, no matter what.
They should, and next year I think we'll put in our RFP if we're
yeah,
going to be
we've
going
talked
out
about that
for.
several times. It's really past due.
I don't think we have to talk several times, Mr. Maloney. One time is enough for
Yeah.
them, and they
You would
should,
think so.
they
Well,
should follow
I
it.
emailed
Yes.
today.
I reminded, I'll have to remind Matt, I didn't.
I
do that,
emailed
so-
today,
I know you, yeah, you.
But
Yeah.
it's something the village staff shouldn't have to email
Right.
for their invoice,
Right, I
so
agree.
we'll have to get that fixed.
Just a couple questions.
Yeah.
Our fund balance that we have for the village, what's the history? How has that been for the last few years? Have we added to it? Have we taken from it?
We used it for our 2018 budget. We used 150,000 of it, but I'll say it was poorly used because we used it for operating. That's what made last year's budget so tough for the village, because we plugged it into operating and I couldn't find any revenues to support continuing operations, because you can't keep applying that. I'll add I'm gonna spit off your comment, our SAFER, which we agreed the $400,000, 400 plus, that is where I'm gonna recommend taking it from fund balance. And that's really gonna, we're gonna take a big hit on that one, I think.
So, but historically,
Historically, we have not used it except for one-time things, and we have followed our policy. I think it's 35% of operating.
but my question is, has it been increasing every year? Is it decreasing? Is it staying relatively flat? I'm just kind of, I know what the history was when I was running
I
the
have
police
it.
department on our fund
I have a
balance,
graph.
and we added to it every year. I'm just curious for the village.
See, I had a graph for all that stuff. This is not updated, but we'll open it up. Here we go. So here we go. It's been decreasing, as you can see. Here's the unassigned. I guess the unassigned is the more important one.
Excuse me.
Clay and Matt, you guys are here. I realize Matt, I saw you emailed budget earlier. I kind of read through that, and Clay, I don't think you got put one together yet, but can you at least update this committee and the board on what you're looking at, or, from a, not to give me exact dollars, I mean, Matt, you had some, but you don't, but as far as staffing needs, what are you guys looking at?
Well, I think as far as the village is concerned, I know I talked with Jessica about WRS contributions are going up. I think for the village's portion is around 15,000, which is a very large hit for that. Generally, it's pretty, the increases aren't that dramatic. I don't know what happened in their funding formula, so to speak, but they run quite a bit from last year. So that's a pretty large hit. Contractual wage increases, it looks like our contract is not settled yet, but if it goes as proposed, it's a 2% in January, 1% in July. Insurance, we discussed, that's good news, a 1% increase. Some other minimal increases, legal fees are going up, cell phone increases. Our workman's comp rate has gone through the roof with Jason Weiland's death. That hangs on for 3 years, so we'll still have that in 2020. We've had some minor other workman's comp related injuries that again will remain for 3 years, so I expect that to probably go up. We're expecting 2 retirements in 2020 with payouts, and that usually comes from our undesignated fund balance, which, as you had said, it's been continually going up at Everest Metro's over the last few years, and it was contributed to again last year. So I think we're around $400,000 or $500,000 in our undesignated fund balance. So if I remember correctly. So we have historically taken out, Joint Finance has taken out $150,000 out of that to offset operating costs every year. Fortunately, unfortunately, we've had gaps in staffing in officers, so 70-some% of my budget is personnel wages and benefits. So when we have a vacancy like an officer or clerical, like we did again this year, even though I may be over a few thousand, a couple of line items that really, at the end of the year, we come in under budget, and then that goes back into the undesignated fund balance, which again is used to offset operating costs at the discretion of Joint Finance, and really that money has been used in there historically for retirements, and since I've been, and since you've been in there the last 10 years since I've been paying attention to it, it seems to be sustaining itself so far. But those are really the big things that we're looking at. Equipment and all those other things are pretty status quo with raises like everybody's seeing as far as trying to predict gas and electric and vehicles go up marginally. Some of the computer and technology stuff is always going up. We're kind of bound by those. We still have 2 more years to pay off our new records management system. That was new in 2019. We were able to negotiate to pay it was just under $100,000 portion of that large multi-million-dollar system in increments for 3 years, so that helped. And that's been absorbed by our operating budget. So really, other than those things, I don't know what the percentage is, but again, the ones I mentioned would probably be the big things that really I don't have a lot of control over.
How about staffing?
Well, staffing's always a concern. I've been approached and we're looking at been asked to look at some of our comparables, which I usually supply every year. An easy way to look at that is officers per capita, and looking at similar cities, plus or minus 2,000 has been the comparable. And in doing so, we're still at the bottom, even though we were fortunate to add 2 officers in 18 that were approved in 17, and then we added a school officer, which 75% is that paid by the school in 2019. Even with those additions, we're still at the bottom amongst our current comparables. That's looking more at end of last year. So there's surveys are starting to come around through Wisconsin Chiefs of Police Association, which is a really beneficial and pretty extensive survey. Hopefully everybody that gets the email that's part of that participates in it, because it looks at salaries and budgets and very helpful things for chiefs to kind of evaluate yourself where we place as far as staffing and what, even some structure stuff is in there, second command and some of those things. So when we go through it when it's complete, it kind of puts a perspective on how you rank in there. So when that comes out, it'll be interesting to share. There's also some things in municipal facts book that I can get specialized reports drafted in looking at comparables. It's difficult a little bit that, we serve, Everest Metro serves a population of about 18,200. So it's hard to compare our officers with village when they're at about 15,000. So we have to compare where we're at amongst bigger cities because we serve Schofield and the town. So, but I will get those things as the budget season progresses, and as I've talked about before in board meetings and at joint finance meetings, I would like to have discussions about where we stand in the future, whether that's next year, 2 years, or 5 years, or 10 years, as the village continues to grow. The city of Schofield continues to be struggling with growth because of their geographical restrictions. I know there's limitations in multi-juris saves money, but it also creates challenges when you have 3 different municipalities at the table in different situations. So I have a meeting with Schofield, the mayor, and the chair of their finance committee coming up at the end of August to start discussions on their status as a city. And some of those discussions will then be brought forward in joint finance to kind of see how that plays out. So there's some things in the works to look at, but I would like, I guess personally, I would like the community and the boards to take what I've been saying for several months as far as what the community is getting for their money, what officers we have on the road, what types of calls we are seeing, and the current trends in drugs and mental health. And our trend is trending towards reactive and losing a lot of proactivity. It'll be interesting to see. We've been faced with a lot of gaps in staffing this year. We've had 3 FMLA leaves this summer and 4 other officers on various injuries, work-related and non-work-related, which has been a struggle to keep 3 officers on the road, which is essentially what it's been. And generally that's including somebody on overtime. So service level has definitely been taking a hit this summer. But again, that's generally not that big of an anomaly. I know when, while you were chief, we had 5 on FMLA on that one summer, and we've had to pull our drug officer from the county SIU position to just take calls and fill a patrol schedule. We also had to take our community service officer off of special events. We were able to do the National Night Out, which was a lot of time in the making, but now she's working investigations and covering road gaps. So as we face the same budget restraints that all municipalities do, we have to eliminate, unfortunately, the things that are good or the niceties for the public, and we return to responding to calls and doing less service-related activities. So the point of that is that's the trend we're going on, and I think that decision makers have to decide if that's what level of service they want at their police department level, or if they would like more proactive and more enforcement of nuisance and speeding and those things that we don't unfortunately have an opportunity to
basically reactive.
Yes.
So all the proactive stuff has kind of gone out the window.
We've been forced to because, we get a major incident when you have 3 officers on the road. An investigation, we had a home invasion with injuries, and which was a robbery, simple, fire on Camp Phillips. We can't block off Camp Phillips Road with 3 cops, it just won't work. And then secure the scene and then investigate the fire and assist the fire department. It's a daily occurrence where 3 is not enough. And it's a far change from what I think the community was used to 5 years ago.
The school liaison officer, is that a sunshine money or is that indefinite?
Indefinite.
From the school?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And it's rare that the
I
school
know.
district pays 100%.
That's why I thought, I just wanted to clarify that.
We're
so.
fortunate. A lot of departments put them in there at their full expense, a lot of municipalities, and
Mhm.
usually the best is only half.
Mhm.
It's really rare that
Mhm.
you get a school district paying 100%.
Well,
We'd be there
yeah.
anyways. I mean,
Yep,
we,
yep.
prior to having the officer in the middle school, we were running there, it had to be daily.
Mhm.
The incidents with mental health and behavioral related incidents would sometimes go hand in hand or are hard to differentiate. Special needs has been, a real strain on the school as well. We've had numerous meetings about how to address these issues with mental health facility, the school district, social services, and us, and they're all finding it to be challenging.
Okay.
Yeah, just I guess a little historical perspective, having sat in that chair for quite a while. The village and the department was level for 2005 up until 2018.
Yes.
So for 13 years, the village grew 25% during that time, and the police department was stagnant. We added 2, which was a Band-Aid. But the police department needs more officers, and it's a struggle to even get them now. You can't even get people to apply, nobody wants to do the job anymore.
We had 10 applications, we did a testing process, and most of the applicants had made comments about having tested other places where there was 2 applicants, 7. One of the candidates said, City of Eau Claire, which I still find hard to believe, said they had 0 applicants, 0 people applied. So it's a change. We may need to look at how we're recruiting to try to keep up, but the talent pool is dwindling and the numbers are definitely dwindling. And there's a lot of people that are leaving this profession for other things, which is something we've never seen before.
Very true.
I guess I would like to see the taxpayer line stuff. I'd like to see it, budget year to year, and you kind of look, well, here's what we had last year, but I think it's important for all the trustees and finance committee members kind of take an outside look and say, how do we compare on a little more, global perspective with our neighbors? How much do we dedicate, as a percentage of our budget towards this department, that department, that department? Because I think it's important to look at yourself and kind of look at some outside benchmarks instead of just looking internally. And I think that, I've done the research in the past, and I know Everest Metro was hands down the least per capita for policing and the least staff. You already alluded to the staffing issue. It can't go on for that long. The village we're seeing some growth, is continuing to grow, and I think we need to address that, and whether that's, we had an officer this year or one for next few years, just to start getting caught up to where you're not just chasing after everything. I know we're completely reactive now, but we need to get back to where there's at least some proactive time. Probably no radar being run, it's just, there's no time for that, because it's too many calls and so little staff. So it needs to be, we need to look at it, and I think we need to understand how we prioritize our spending. Public safety is usually 50 to 65% of the entire budget. I don't think that's the case here, but I think we need to take an outside look and see what our priorities should be. And I think that outside look will probably be telling.
What's the ratio of the police to the population?
Currently, we're at 1.53 officers per capita.
I gotta
I
confirm
had
this
a
is the
sheet put together, I think I shared it with this board. If we were the same as our neighbors, as Rothschild or Wasapee, they're around 2 officers per capita. We'd have to add 7 or 8 officers just to be equal with our neighbors. A comparable, really equal in size, they're about 800 more in population, is Marshfield. They have 41 officers, we have 28. So, and they have 800 more people than we do. So,
What should be?
well, that's up to the, what you want for a service level. I mean, 1.5 is really low, really low. Looking at our comparables across the state that are plus or minus 2,000, we're still at the bottom. We've been at the bottom, even with adding those 3 in the last couple of years, we're still at the bottom. High is 42, the median range is about 32, or 33, so if we added about 5 would be more in the middle range, so.
We're at 28 right now?
Yes.
Okay.
So more years that go by that you don't add, you're falling behind, because even all our comparables are continually trying to, they're facing everything that the village is facing, restraints to it.
Okay.
And Jessica, what did you say was the new, not assessment value, but amortization value that we can raise the levy by? I'm sure I'm getting my terms mixed up.
Okay, so you're talking about the sheet that I was saving to the end. It's the fun, exciting
Jumped the
sheet.
gun.
I've been trying to explain this for years, but I finally got a really nice spreadsheet. In the past, you can see on the bottom here how much we've increased our levies every year. And in 2020, projected 224. This is a projection. I just threw it in there. We can change these numbers however we want. 2021 projected 213,000. That uses up any levy limit room that we have. And so the following year, 2022, based on state levy limits, our levy increase would be 64,000.
Okay. So $64,000 doesn't buy a lot for cops.
$64,000 does not fund the union contracts that they were talking about
Right.
increase.
Right.
Let me explain this sheet. This is called our levy limit worksheet. This is what the state, I'm sure there's a lot of talk about the state limiting how you can increase your levy. This applies for your general levy. There's, in the bottom here, I have it split out. General fund levy, debt service fund, Weston Aquatic Center, and Capital Improvement Fund. Those are the 4 funds that we levy for. And as you can see, some have been rather stagnant. In 2019, we decreased our debt service fund to 1.25. We didn't have any debt, our debt dropped, so we reduced our debt service fund to 1.25. If you look up above on the debt service for GEO authorized after 2001, that number can go up to 1.250. And in the past, you can see we've been under that. We've been under what our debt service fund is. And we are slowly approaching that number. Once we hit what our debt service fund levy is, we are limited to what we can increase to our growth. Our growth hasn't been averaging very good for our levy increases. 2017 budget year, our growth was 0.99, which was a $48,000 increase. 2018 was relatively good, 1.85% growth at 91,000. Last year was terrible, a 0.903 at 45,000. This year, this is a known number, it's 1.25. So if we had no debt, we would be able to increase our levy $63,000. The only reason we're able to go above and beyond the 63 is because of this thing called the debt service exemption. And because in the past, our administration made sure that we never used that debt service exemption to the max. by doing that, that allowed that we were able to increase beyond our net growth. So that was why, in the past, we were able to levy more than our net new construction. This was never an issue in the past because of that debt service exemption flexibility that we had. This is something we went to the state this year because we knew this was coming. Our transportation aids are expected to be decreasing until the year 2022, which we're really fortunate that happens to correspond in the same year. This year we lost 56, next year 53. We're continuing to lose. We barely can offset that loss with our net new construction. But luckily, I said our debt service fund, because we can, the state cannot limit and prevent you from levying for your debt. So that's where the levy limit worksheet allows you to be flexible and levy to what your principal and interest payments are for the following year. There's a great opportunity for everyone is invited to, Ellers is going to be holding a workshop that's going to be explaining this sheet and how the state does allow for a little flexibility in this sheet, but unfortunately we don't qualify for any of them. I tried last year. One of them was intergovernmental agreements. We have SAFER and we have the police. Well, SAFER we didn't apply because their increase was greater than CPI. So I was not able to increase our levy for SAFER expenses. They increased their levy above CPI. And then for the Everest Metro, because it went back from the beginning when it was formed. It said if the increase wasn't based on your percentage share, you couldn't. They didn't explain it to me. They just rejected my form and said I had to refile. I was a little disappointed. I tried. Because John did it in the past 1 year. He got it through. I don't know if the state changed the rules, but I thought I was being smart, and I failed. So I invite you all to come to the Ellers workshop. Let us know. We'll sign you up. And he'll explain this and what kind of opportunities there are for us to increase our revenues. Right now, we're pretty stuck. I do have a nice spreadsheet that we're going to go through that showed our revenues. Our revenues aren't very exciting. We have the property taxes. Other taxes is mostly, 400 of that other taxes is for the amount of money that the water utility gives the village. It's about $400,000. It changes slightly, but it should be stabling off. It changes based on the assets in the water utility. It's called a PILT payment. Special assessments, those are just fees that we charge people for filling out special assessment letters. Intergovernmental revenues, that's the decreasing with our general transportation aids, and that's a slight increase in the shared revenue budget. I misbudgeted last year, so we got a surprise of $16,000, which offset to negative 37. License and permits, this is a funny one to budget. I don't like budgeting this 100%. Because if your permits go down, you still have a staff that you need to support and pay their wages with. Currently, we do take in $374,000 in license and permits. Over 100 of that is the cable franchise fees. Fines and forfeitures are not changing. Public charges for services were decreasing, closer to actual. Intergovernmental charges will be decreasing, a little bit closer to actual. And miscellaneous revenues are going up. We are charging carry, formerly Foremost, for a lease agreement. That's a lot of that increase for the $13,000. And then applied fund balance, we are decreasing that $21,000 because there's only one expense that we're budgeting this year that would really qualify for fund balance use. And that's our Badger books again.
Okay. Comments?
Is that where you discussed earlier about the $100,000 for the roads, that you could get that on the debt levy instead of in the operating budget, because then you could increase for it, or?
Yes. That's a strategy that a lot of municipalities are forced to use. I was talking to Clay about that for like their police cars. What we could do is, in order for the village to afford them, we could go to a local bank, get a 3-year note or however long we keep them, and we could increase our levy to pay the debt that is financing those cars, or the village's portions of those cars. I mean, that's just a trick that municipalities are forced to play because $64,000 increase is really hard. And this is just an estimate, but according to our levy limit worksheets, that's what they're for. The state's limiting the levy.
So, yeah, when you say 64,000 is hard, it's not enough. I guess we all get that, I guess, and what are our options for raising revenue? We can take out more debt service and add to that number. We can make it bigger. If once it starts dropping below 1.25, then our tax rate does go down, but it doesn't help operations at all. And, with all due respect to the public safety side, I know Public Works didn't add staff or didn't add equipment when we were growing, and we ended up with doing one extra plow route that probably in another community would have been covered, so we were doing a longer route. So I think all the departments have been through that, and I think if you look at those municipal facts that we were talking about earlier, if you look at where Weston's ratios are relative to everybody else, we're on the low end on expenditures per capita. You could certainly look at, argue that some of those statistics should be looking at a different, basis, on a per mile cost for street maintenance versus per capita. But I think if you look at our operation and our expenditures as a municipality, we're relatively low compared to other communities our size and even in this county. And, we can certainly look at more.
In there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry? Because a lot of the other them got a lot more state share revenue that are our same size, and their budgets are a lot higher because they're getting a lot more of that state share revenue that we're not, so.
And they have more fat to cut, I think, because of where we were in our growing, but we didn't levy like we were growing. We held our levy and we didn't collect more revenue as we should have. And I think that's really hurting us now with the state. A lot of municipalities have fat, we don't have any, so it's really hard to cut.
Well, the hard part, public sees, if you increase anything, well, they're increasing taxes again. But I don't think what they realize with the $64,000, you can't even cover a CPI increase for all the employees
We're not going to be
without changing
raising taxes,
anything.
though.
And nothing
Right.
is, that's just wages, which is the big chunk. It has nothing to do with the rest of the operational items that you need to run all the respective departments. So, it's either you reduce services, or you have to ask, you've got to use some of the tricks that you discussed
Right.
to get enough to, you can at least keep your service level status quo. And that's kind of where we're at. I mean, there isn't enough money to increase any level of service, and we're struggling to even maintain a status quo level of service. And I know it's been dropping in a lot of departments because of that, and that's, I don't think the public generally understands that aspect of it, that when they look at a budget of our size, that, if you add a percentage to that, how minuscule that is, and for everybody working out there that gets a raise at the end of the year, a basic CPI, that is not enough to even, what we can raise it is not even enough to cover that, So it is frustrating, and unfortunately, the hard part for the board and, the elected officials is saying, we have to cut somewhere, what gets cut, and what's the impact, what's the service level. And I know there's another, when we get to the board of trustees, there's an agenda item on there about adding, and we can add more services, we can add more things. We have to focus on what our core services are, and those have to be funded. The extra stuff, the things that people like to see, a new park or a new kayak launch or those types of things, they have to go by the wayside, you know, so that we can maintain what our core services are to the village.
Wisconsin has the highest reliance in the country on local property tax at 84%. And these property tax caps have killed local governments all across the state. Two of the places that I work have been hoping to do projects for years upon years, but because both of them have less than 2,000 people, they're never going to see those projects realized.
Just to give you an idea, we had $16.4 million of new construction. That's a lot, and all we got is 1.25. So it's really, I mean, yes, we're growing, but it's just so minuscule compared to, because our total equalized value right now is 1.276. So 1,276,000. So we got a large. So when you only get 16 million. It's not much of an increase, allowable increase, so. I guess another thing, we're talking about revenues. This is where we need to look at our other, we used to have a transportation utility, and we used to have, I'll say it, we properly allocated time to the stormwater utility, because guys are working there, staff is working there, and we don't have the proper wages that are going there. So in the future, we're going to be saying, okay, we're raising our taxes, say, 5 cents. We're going to be looking at collecting money from our taxpayers through different means, because the services that are offering qualify under those type of means, such as doing more ditching, or there's a couple other things that were in the stormwater that we pulled out that maybe should be back in there, just because that qualifies for stormwater expenses, and the village can't afford to pay it with general tax levy anymore.
The hard part when dealing with these budgets is getting that educational component to the taxpayers, you know, because they'll wait until they get to their bill at the end of the year and go, my taxes went up, what am I getting for this? You know, and it's really hard to, you know, it's really hard to fully get that out in a meeting, or, you know, the few people that, you know, might say, I want to go look at some of the telecasts, or read through, come to a meeting or read through a packet to kind of look through the budget. But when you're talking $64,000 with the amount of employees we have, you know, if the health insurance hadn't been raised, that would have been, if we would have had a normal health insurance increase, we'd be looking at no increase at all. You know, so then what do you either lay off people,
And that's where the
reduce services,
prioritization.
reduce departments, that's kind of where we're at. And the hard part is getting that information to the public, and then getting enough of a feedback from our constituents that say, yeah, we're okay, we'd like to at least maintain our services, or we'd like to see a service improved here. It's a difficult discussion to have, because a lot of people just say, I don't like it if you raise our taxes. I get it. Nobody wants to pay
But, you know,
more.
if you look at my
But we have to tie it
spreadsheet,
into we have to tie that into our
we're not going to
service.
be raising taxes, though. In the levy year 2021, the state is not going to allow us to raise taxes. The $64,000 is just a few cents. I mean, that's all. They're not going to be they're going to be happy that you only raised my taxes, but they're going to be mad that their services are really going to be affected.
Well, you can increase it if you increase the debt service though, right?
Yes, but you have to increase your principal and interest payments. So once we get to the year, after the year 2021 budget year, 2022 budget year, we can increase our levy, but only if we borrow. So we
Well,
need
so-
to,
Yeah, so that's the time we're gonna have to use more of the so-called gimmicks in order to make that happen, is what it
Right.
amounts to.
yeah, you'll borrow
And-
in November and pay it off in February.
And as long as they leave that available to us, I guess we're going to have to do it, because otherwise we're gonna lose services and that's not good either. And I mean, if they're leaving that door open, we need to use that door to our advantage, so that we don't get in a situation where we have to cut services and personnel and all of those things that are, everybody's expecting in the community. I mean, I'm like everybody else, I don't like to turn around and have my taxes increase, but the bottom line is that none of us want our services cut either. And we know that we go to the grocery store every year, it goes up, we go to this or whatever it may be, there is an increase in those costs, and we're paying a small portion of it in our taxes in reality, because our neighbor is paying their portion too, or a portion of it.
And when we leased all those vehicles and equipment, that was hurting this whole thing because we weren't borrowing.
Yeah, it doesn't qualify for debt
Mhm.
service exemption.
So that's where part of our problem came from too.
The strategy, though, is not to borrow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
The thought is
But it's the
borrowing is
same-
bad, when in fact borrowing, in this case for a municipality, allows you to do more things
Right.
for our constituents.
Right.
and economically, it's not like it was leasing was that much different than borrowing would have been, so.
Right.
No.
So what are we saying? We're willing to borrow money to fund operations? Is that what you're saying?
No,
No.
I think to borrow money for like the equipment and different things, that there's more money for operations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll indirectly.
We don't have that much
You use
in there.
that borrowing process to purchase basically assets rather than turning around and paying for them out of operations. And those assets may be vehicles or other things that qualify for that borrowing process. And again, it's a tool.
And
You
that
have
frees
to
up,
use your
that
tools.
frees up operation more for expenses.
Right.
Yeah, well, I'm not so, well, we can look at how much is in there, in our budget that would be in that category, but I'm not sure there's much in there in that.
There's not a
lines.
lot. We've been,
But again, when we turn around and we look at things for roads, in reality, those are assets that are added to our books in the end with the improvements, et cetera. So those are, some of those are available for borrowing.
the overlays, I don't know if I would borrow for a chip seal or
No.
anything, but maybe it will get to that.
Right.
I don't know.
Well,
We're
No.
hoping the state comes through with some changes too.
other options for things like that, a special charge for service, and you charge, you know, it's like a special assessment doing the year that it's constructed, so.
Right.
Perhaps people would prefer that we borrow for things like that, I don't know.
Here's a nice little spreadsheet. This is our general transportation aids. Michael compiled this, I think it was last year, so it's pretty up to date. From 2011 through 2019, we lost $710,000. And that was pretty much because you can see our 6-year average cost that we spend on roads has steadily been dropping. And that results in a reduction of our aid, unfortunately. If we do nothing and keep it at status quo, 3,013,000 6-year average, we would be getting about $428,000 in transportation aid.
I know at one time you had a floor that was going to, or potentially to. Is that still
Well, we're looking at it right here.
That's
okay?
pretty much what it's reflecting there. I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
2021, we have a reduction of 7,000. And 2022, we should receive a check, which would be nice. This was just, I'll just say it was kind of poor planning when we received all the money years ago. We funded our operations, didn't raise our levy at all, and not realizing that that money was going to go away. As you can see why we struggled though, because these reductions, and then with the allowable CPI increases, it was really hard to fund these reductions in the past. Anything else on budget, or we do have, I think, one more agenda item?
Any more discussion, comments?
Only just one, and
Barb?
I know it was only like $8,000 increase, but on interest income, I was just listening to the news again today, and they're looking at dropping rates even farther, so I'm not sure you're gonna,
Well, I think that's part of that is a change in the unrealized gain loss, which that is recovering.
Yeah, that, I'm hoping in the future when we are looking at, like, when we're renewing, I had a call recently and I definitely reinvested in investments that were very short, relatively short term, like 3 years. Because the investments that were taken out in the past were so, they were affected by the market risk so much, and unfortunately, the market risk has to be reflected on our financial statements, even though we do not intend on selling them. Yeah, so current to date, $31,000 is our market adjustment. $31,000. Our year-to-date physical cash coming in and interest is $60,000. We are flush with cash because. First of all, we just have more money in the bank account. We borrowed some funds. We do allocate, but in the past, the TIF and the debt service both used general fund money, which increased, which was why the interest for the general fund was so much lower because it was in other funds at the time. We are
they pay
projecting.
interest down the road?
What?
Doesn't TIF pay the village interest?
It does, but it did not add up to 60,000. Plus, with the rate increases, we're getting close to 2%. So,
But I was just kind of wondering, because if they're looking at dropping, you know,
well, I got
That's
50,000
great.
budgeted. We should be okay with the 50 because last year the rates weren't so good and we got 65. So,
okay, well, I just, that was the only thing I had thought.
no, that's good. Obviously, it's a good discussion to have, and I appreciate all the help.
All right. Good to go? Moving on, policy issues, discussions, recommendations. Number 8, discussion and possible recommendation / approval on the 2019 CIP budget adjustments.
So we are looking for the recommendation from finance. This is just the budget that's going to be approving what we borrowed and where we're going to be spending it. It was already technically approved, but we just need the formal approval by the finance and the board.
Okay?
I will so move to accept the budgeted CIP.
How about recommend?
Recommend?
Recommend.
Okay. We have a recommendation from Bender. Second
I'll second.
by Ermeling on the discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
And for the board, be looking for a motion to approve the 2019 budget adjustments for the debt service fund and capital project funds, totaling a revenue budget increase of $2,778,298, and an expenditure budget increase of $2,161,669.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Maloney, second by Zagami. On the question, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
I'll just make a off-the-cuff comment. The reason why they're not the same is because we budgeted for safer equipment. So obviously we didn't have to re-budget in our budget adjustment for that.
Okay.
That's why they're different.
Thank you. Nothing under resolutions, ordinances. Future items, next meeting date, Monday, September 9th, a special board meeting at 5:30 PM. Monday, September 16th, regular board meeting, that's Wally Wally. And Monday, September 16th is a 4:30 regular committee meeting, finance. And October 21st, 4:30 finance committee also. Number 10, topics for future meetings. Anybody?
Would you like another joint budget meeting coming up? Do you want to do it a month from now? Thoughts?
I think it'd be appropriate.
I guess-
it'd be
Yeah, I
appropriate.
do.
I'd like
Just
to
hope-
see
Yeah.
some of the tools you discussed to see
Yeah.
how we could possibly implement them. I know there's.
Do you
equipment.
want to use anything this year, or are we gonna go status quo? Like I guess, what are you thinking?
You're talking for 2020 budget, right?
Yes.
Well, I think, knowing that there's staffing increases requests from public safety, I know they got squad cars that could be purchased and free up some that's possibly add an officer. And there might be some corresponding, something similar and safer that they can look at if we are going to have those staffing increases.
Okay.
At least see what it looks like on paper and show us how
Administrator
how
Donner?
it could be structured.
Sure.
So I was just gonna ask, I know that at one time there was a suggestion we maybe handled the budget in, I don't know, workshop and like a retreat kind of situation, but, you know, having gone together tonight like this and doing it in the next couple of meetings, is there any desire to do that again? We're probably able to handle it in this type of a meeting, I would think.
I would think so.
So possibly nicer fitting chairs?
No.
You know, oh.
Well, that wasn't my thought, just that I
I'm
guess
just
there was
teasing.
some.
I'm just teasing.
Since
All
we're
right,
all,
all right.
since we're all here together, I guess,
Mhm.
no need to set up a special meeting.
No, I think
guess would be my
this
thought.
is good. This is, keeps us on task, yeah.
And then, I guess, kind of following up from your discussion with the chief, as you look at, you know, the village of Weston relative to other communities, is that something that maybe we can work on together? Because there's, I mean, there's the public safety aspect, there's this, you know, fire EMS, there's also public works and the general operations, and kind of looking at that all kind of holistically, so we're not just necessarily focused on one department. Would that be
No,
appropriate?
I agree.
Yes.
I think it should
Yes.
be, we should look at it.
Whole thing, yep.
Collectively.
Mhm. Mhm. I agree. Mhm. Okay. 11, remarks from staff. Maybe you just got all that, right? Or did I say that already? Remarks from board members. Or I'm sorry, this is Wally's portion, board members.
Okay, remarks from board members.
I just want to apologize for showing up late. I had a Marathon County Human Resource Finance Committee meeting that lasted way longer than it should have. But I had no doubt that I think other my colleagues on the village board here, they didn't need me.
Well, we're happy you're here. 13, remarks from committee members, finance? Nope.
The only thing I have is that I will not be available next month.
Okay. All right. Thank you. 14, announcements. Wally?
Okay, looking for a motion to adjourn for the board of trustees.
So moved.
Motion by
Or second?
Maloney, second by Zagami. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Adjournment by the finance committee,
So moved.
by Bender and second by,
Second.
on the question, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good, right, Carrie?
Perfect.
Got us on?
And if you want to stick around in 22 minutes, we'll be around.
On to the next thing.
On to the next thing. That's my birthday. Dinner. First part of my birthday, excitement here.
Just a touch up, a little powder.
She was on
Get a little
vacation
shiny.
until today.
Get a little shiny up there. I just
I
rubbed my
got
legs,
a
I'm good.
auto
Yeah.